6 traits that make you silently irresistible after 65 without saying a word. What if I told you that true attraction after 65 has nothing to do with youth, beauty, or trying to impress others? You see, real magnetism, the kind that makes people drawn to you without you even trying, doesn't fade with age, it evolves. And those who understand this, they become unforgettable. Think about the people you naturally admire, the ones who command attention without saying a word. What is it about them? It's not their clothes, their hair, or even their words. It's something deeper, a presence, a quiet confidence, a way of carrying themselves that makes others take notice. The best part? You don't have to be born with it. These qualities can be cultivated at any stage of life. In fact, some of the most captivating people in the world only discover this power later in life. And today I'm going to share 6 ways to develop this silent attraction, qualities that will make people gravitate toward you, respect you, and genuinely enjoy your presence. And here's the thing. Most people overlook the final one, yet it's the key that ties everything together. Stay with me until the end and you'll see why. Let's begin. 1. Quiet confidence. The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "He who knows others is wise, he who knows himself is enlightened." There is a quiet strength in the person who no longer feels the need to prove their worth. In ancient Greece, Socrates walked the streets of Athens, engaging in discussions not to boast of his knowledge but to challenge his own understanding. His quiet confidence drew people in, not through grand speeches, but through the wisdom of knowing he still had much to learn. This kind of presence, one of calm self-assurance rather than arrogance, is what makes a person truly magnetic. I remember a man named Samuel, an old friend of mine who had built his life from nothing. He started as a factory worker in the 1950s, working 12-hour shifts with grease-stained hands and calloused fingers. Over time, through grit and quiet determination, he built his own small business. It wasn't easy, but he never sought applause. He wasn't the kind of man to boast about his achievements, nor did he demand respect. Yet everywhere he went, people listened when he spoke. One day we sat together on the porch of his farmhouse watching the sun dip below the hills. He told me about a younger man who had recently joined his company, eager but reckless, always trying to prove himself. The young man spoke too much, never listening, always trying to be the loudest in the room. Samuel smiled and said, "I used to be like him once. Thought I had to show people what I could do. But you learn, as time goes on, that real strength doesn't need to be shown. It's felt." He told me about a time when his business nearly collapsed in the early 80s. Inflation was high, loans were tightening, and he had employees relying on him. He could have panicked, could have made desperate decisions, but instead he remained steady. While others rushed to cut corners or abandoned ship, he calmly adapted, made wise choices, and slowly rebuilt. He never bragged about his resilience, never tried to make people admire him, but his quiet confidence gave his employees the reassurance they needed to keep going, and in the end, the company survived. Samuel carried himself with a grace that couldn't be faked. He didn't need to be the loudest in the room because his presence alone spoke for him. People trusted him because he trusted himself. He didn't seek validation, and in doing so, he commanded respect without ever asking for it. Now, in today's world, I see so many chasing approval. On social media, in conversations, in their daily lives, they talk louder, post more, and try harder, all in the hope of being seen. But the truth is, the people who leave the biggest impact aren't the ones shouting for attention. They're the ones who move through life with quiet certainty, who know themselves so deeply that others can't help but be drawn to them. So, I ask you, have you ever known someone like that? Someone whose presence alone made you take notice? Or perhaps, have you ever felt the shift within yourself when you stopped trying so hard and just allowed yourself to be? Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear your perspective. 2. The power of saying less and meaning more. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Wisdom has never been about the loudest voice in the room. It has always belonged to those who know when to remain silent, when to observe, and when to let their words carry weight. I knew a man named Thomas, a retired judge in his late 70s. He was the kind of man who never spoke unless he had something worth saying. At family gatherings, he sat back, watching the conversation unfold. smiling quietly as his children and grandchildren debated politics, the economy, and the latest scandals. Every now and then someone would turn to him and ask, "Dad, what do you think?" And when he finally spoke, the room fell silent. His words were never rushed, never careless, and that made them all the more powerful. I remember one Thanksgiving when his youngest grandson, Ethan, came storming into the house, angry about something a friend had posted online. "Grandpa, can you believe what he said? I wrote back immediately and told him he was wrong. I gave him every reason why." Ethan was young, full of fire, believing that if he spoke first and spoke loudly, he would win the argument. Thomas simply took a sip of his coffee, waited a moment, and then said, "And did that change his mind?" Ethan hesitated. "Well, no, but at least I made my point." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Did you make your point, or did you just add to the noise?" The boy frowned, confused. So Thomas told him a story. "When I was a young lawyer, I had a case where I was up against a man who talked endlessly. He interrupted, he argued, and he pushed his words onto everyone. I could have matched his energy, but instead, I let him talk himself into circles. I listened. I let him reveal more than he meant to. And when the time came for me to speak, I said only what was necessary. It won the case. Not because I was loud, but because I was precise. Words lose their value when they are thrown around carelessly. Speak less, but mean more." Ethan sat quietly, staring at the table. He had always thought that winning an argument meant speaking first, speaking fastest. But that night, he didn't post another reply. Instead, he read, listened, and thought before he spoke. In today's world, it's easy to believe that being heard is the same as being understood. But those who listen, truly listen, hold the real power. They don't need to prove themselves. They don't waste words. And when they do speak, people listen. Have you ever known someone like that? Someone whose silence carried more wisdom than another person's shouting? Or have you ever realized that sometimes saying nothing at all speaks louder than 1,000 words? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. 3. The effortless elegance of self-respect. The Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." He meant that those who stretch themselves too thin, always giving, always accommodating, lose themselves in the process. True self-respect isn't about arrogance or selfishness. It's about knowing your own worth and refusing to let others drain you of your energy, your peace, or your dignity. I once knew a woman named Eleanor, a retired nurse in her late 70s. She had spent her entire life caring for others, patients, colleagues, family, and friends. It was who she was, or at least, who she believed she had to be. For years she said yes to every request. Babysit the grandkids at the last minute? Of course. Help a neighbor who never returned a favor? Absolutely. Listen to a friend unload their problems for hours, but never ask how she was doing? Without question. But one day something changed. She had scheduled a long overdue doctor's visit. Her knees had been aching for months, and the pain had started interfering with her sleep. But that morning her daughter called in a panic. "Mom, can you watch the kids today? I know it's short notice, but I really need you." Eleanor hesitated. This was her chance to finally focus on her own well-being, to address the chronic pain that had been making it harder to move, harder to enjoy life. Yet, as always, she felt that tug of obligation. She almost said yes. Almost. But then, she thought about all the times she had sacrificed her own needs for the sake of others. How she had put herself last for decades, always believing that selflessness was a virtue, that good people never said no. And then, in a quiet but powerful moment, she said, "I can't today, honey. I have an appointment." The response was immediate. A heavy silence on the other end of the phone. "Oh, okay. I'll figure something out." It wasn't anger, wasn't resentment, just surprise. Eleanor had never set a boundary before, had never put her needs first. But the world didn't fall apart. Her daughter adjusted, the kids were fine, and Eleanor, for the first time in years, felt something she hadn't realized she was missing. Self-respect. Over time, she started protecting her energy more. She no longer said yes out of guilt. She no longer allowed one-sided friendships to drain her. And the most interesting thing happened? People started respecting her more. Those who truly cared about her learned to appreciate her time instead of taking it for granted. and those who only valued her for what she could do for them, they drifted away. Many of us were raised to believe that saying no is selfish, but let me tell you, from a lifetime of experience, there is a difference between kindness and self-sacrifice. If you do not respect your own limits, no one else will. If you give and give without protecting your own well-being, you don't become more loved, you become exhausted. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you needed to start valuing yourself more? Have you ever said yes when you should have said no? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. 4. The undeniable allure of being fully present. The Cherokee proverb says, "Don't let yesterday use up too much of today." The world moves fast, and it's easy to get caught up in regrets of the past or worries about the future. But the most powerful moments, the ones that shape us, connect us, and truly matter, are the ones we fully experience in the present. I remember my old friend Harold, a man who had spent most of his life building a legacy. He had worked tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder, making sure his children had everything they needed. But in doing so, he had mastered the art of always looking ahead. His mind was never in the moment. It was always chasing the next goal, the next project, the next milestone. And then one day, life slowed him down. A stroke at 72 forced him into a hospital bed, unable to move the way he once did, forced to face the reality he had always ignored. The present moment was all he had. I visited him shortly after he started rehabilitation. He looked at me, eyes heavy with the weight of realization, and said, "I spent my whole life planning for a future I never got to enjoy." He told me about the countless times he had been with his family, but never truly with them. At the dinner table, his mind had been elsewhere. During his son's graduation, he had been thinking about an important meeting the next day. Even in moments of joy, he had let his thoughts rob him of fully experiencing them. Now, in recovery, Harold had no choice but to slow down. He learned to savor the small things, his wife's hand in his, the warmth of the morning sun on his skin, the laughter of his grandchildren. He had spent decades chasing life, only to realize that he had been running past it all along. The world today is filled with distractions, phones buzzing, news flashing, worries mounting. But the people who truly stand out, the ones who make the deepest impact, are those who are fully there. When they speak to you, they see you. They aren't waiting for their turn to talk. They aren't rushing to the next moment. They are present, and that presence is magnetic. Harold once told me, "I wasted years waiting for life to happen, when all along it was right in front of me." It took nearly losing everything for him to see that being fully present isn't just a habit, it's a way of living. So I ask you, when was the last time you were truly in the moment? When was the last time you sat with someone and listened, not just with your ears, but with your full attention? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 5. The quiet strength of emotional composure. The ancient Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." True emotional composure isn't about ignoring problems or pretending life is easy. It's about deciding what deserves your energy and what is simply not worth your peace. I knew a man named Robert, a former police officer who had spent 35 years navigating some of the toughest situations imaginable. He had been in high-stress encounters, faced hostility, and witnessed moments that would shake the average person to their core. But even after retiring, what stood out most about Robert wasn't just his experience, it was his unwavering calm. One afternoon we sat at a diner, the kind with old red booths and coffee that never seems to run out. As we sipped our drinks, a heated argument broke out between two younger men at the counter. They were loud and animated, one of them slamming his fist against the counter over what sounded like a disagreement about politics. The waitress looked nervous, the other customers uneasy. But Robert? He didn't flinch. He simply kept stirring his coffee, as if nothing had changed. I raised an eyebrow at him. "That doesn't bother you?" He chuckled, setting his spoon down. "I spent decades watching people let their tempers get the best of them. And you know what I've learned? The loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. Strength isn't in the yelling, the anger, or the reaction. It's in knowing what to engage with and what to let pass." I thought about that as the argument continued. The two young men were exhausted before long, their own tempers tiring them out. Nothing was resolved, nothing was gained. Robert was right. Anger rarely fixes anything, and more often than not it makes us look foolish. He told me about a time when he was still on duty, responding to a domestic dispute. The husband had been furious, shouting and pacing, his fists clenched. Another officer had been quick to match his energy, barking orders and escalating the situation. But Robert? He stood firm, steady, his voice never rising. I let him burn his fire out, he explained, and when he had nothing left to say, that's when I spoke. You can't control another person's emotions, but you can control your own, and sometimes that's the only thing that keeps a situation from turning into something worse. These days I see too many people letting every small thing shake them. A rude comment, a traffic jam, a social media post. It's as if the world has forgotten how to pause before reacting. But the truth is, the strongest people aren't the ones who explode under pressure. They are the ones who choose how they respond. So let me ask you, have you ever let something small steal your peace, only to regret it later? Or have you learned to master the art of pausing, breathing, and choosing how to react? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your wisdom. 6. The magnetic appeal of a life well lived. The Greek philosopher Plato once wrote, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Those who have truly lived don't waste time regretting the past or fearing the future. They embrace each chapter, knowing that every experience has shaped them into who they are today. There is a rare beauty in a person who carries their history not as a burden, but as a testament to a life well lived. I think of my friend Walter, a man who had seen war, built a family, lost love, and found it again in unexpected places. At 84, he wasn't the kind of man who looked back with longing or spoke of his younger days as if they were the only years that mattered. He spoke of every decade with the same reverence, as if life had always been full, no matter the season. One evening, as we sat on his porch watching the sunset, he shared a story that has stayed with me. "You know," he said, "when I was younger, I thought the best years were always ahead. When I was in my 20s, I couldn't wait to be in my 30s. When I was in my 40s, I thought maybe my 50s would bring some real peace. And then, one day, I woke up at 70 and realized I had spent my whole life waiting for the best years, never realizing I was living them the whole time." He chuckled softly. "The funny thing is, I finally stopped waiting, and that's when I really started living." Walter had every reason to dwell on the past. He had lost his wife to illness, seen friends pass away, and felt his body slow down with age. But instead of sinking into nostalgia or bitterness, he leaned into the present. He picked up painting, not because he wanted to master it, but because he enjoyed watching the colors mix on the canvas. He started writing letters to his grandchildren, telling them the stories he wished someone had told him when he was young. And when people asked him how he managed to stay so content, he simply said, "I don't waste time wishing I could be younger. I spend my time making sure I'm living now." A life well lived isn't about how many years you have, it's about what you do with the years you're given. It's about learning, evolving, and finding meaning in every stage. Walter understood this, and because of that, people were drawn to him, not because he had lived a perfect life, but because he had lived. So let me ask you, are you still waiting for life to happen, or are you embracing the years you have right here and now? Tell me, what is something you've learned with age that you wish you had known earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your wisdom. Silent attraction isn't about trying harder. It's about letting go of what doesn't serve you and stepping into the kind of presence that naturally commands attention. The most captivating people aren't chasing approval or forcing their way into conversations. They simply exist in a way that draws others in. So which of these 6 qualities resonated with you the most? Have you ever noticed how the way you carry yourself shapes how others respond to you? Or perhaps is there one trait you're working on embracing more in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly enjoy reading your insights and experiences. If you found this video helpful, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating content that uplifts, inspires, and reminds us all of the power we already hold within. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.